Good morning, welcome to Immediate Future. We want to talk Snapchat with you this morning. They've been in the news in the past day or so, and there's a lot of misconception about where this financial loss has come from and why Snapchat are at the point they are, and many people wrongly thinking it's all Kylie Jenner's fault. It's a coincidence, the Kylie Jenner scenario. And for those of you that aren't aware, Snapchat have just gone through a redesign which has displeased a lot of people, it's fair to say. A petition with over 1.2 million people signed to say, we don't like it, undo it, put it back to how it was. And Kylie Jenner, who is known for being quite outspoken and former fan of Snapchat, has come out and said, right, that's it, I'm off, I'm not using the platform. And many of her followers are claiming to follow suit. Then we hear big numbers, big financial losses coming out of Snapchat. I truly believe the two are not connected. And to explain why, I need to give you a bit of context as to what's been going on at Snapchat, really since they secured their IPO and floated last year. Many of you will know that in Immediate Future, we're in the BBC studios on a quarterly basis, commentating on the earnings calls, particularly for Snapchat. In fact, every earnings call last year, we were the commentators for BBC News and BBC World News, and particularly the Business Live segment that goes out early in the morning and then later at lunchtime with Aaron Hazelhurst. Snapchat made a fundamental flaw in their strategic plan by securing an IPO number and floating the business without having an advertising proposition. The reason that's critical in social media is how social media brands make their money. Companies like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Snapchat, they have to grow their user base to then be able to monetize their proposition. Publishers and brands will spend significant advertising budget to actually serve content to those active users. Facebook have done this really as the yardstick for the last 11 to 12 years. And if you look at some of their revenues, they're increasing their revenues by 50% per quarter. And they're doing that because they've got this absolute huge active user base across diverse age groups. It's not just about the kids, it's not just about the adults. If you go and look at the segmentation of demographics on Facebook, it's very inclusive, and it's inclusive across countries. As a result, brands spend significant advertising budgets to reach those users. There was an opportunity about a year ago now for Snapchat to cannibalize Facebook's success. There was much excitement and curiosity around their well-documented millennial and centennial proposition. The channel had chimed with those audiences, and it's fair to say that those audiences probably liked that the complexity of and how to use Snapchat deterred older demographics. It was the place where you wouldn't get your mum and dad looking at your content, and that resonated with certain users. But that doesn't resonate with advertisers, because if you can't reach older demographics on a channel, you're not going to spend advertising budget on a channel. And in the case of Snapchat, when they floated their business, you couldn't spend any advertising on the channel. They didn't have a proposition. They had great products in beta test out in America. I remember, if you go back and look at any of the BBC interviews I've done in the past year, the first interview I did, I stopped short of being brutally critical of Snapchat because they had a product called Snap to Store that was in beta test in America. In their case study with their trial with the quick service restaurant Wendy's, they'd reached 42,000 users who had snapped the content and then visited store within 1 week of seeing it. Snap to Store was a proposition we were really excited about, and we had clients, Marston's, who have thousands of pubs up and down the country across many formats. For months, Marston's were talking to us about how can we use this case study to actually drive buzz around our pubs. Well, sadly, we had to tell Marston's at the time, well, you can't, the product's not online. And then when it did come online, Snap wanted £100,000 for a trial to use it as a Snapchat partner. Now, whilst there are undoubtedly some brands that will happily go and drop 100 grand on a trial, I can say that in today's market, even if you've got millions of pounds within your ad budget, the smart way budgets are run and returns have to be justified, there are few brands that will throw 100 grand at a trial. It took many months for Snapchat to realise this. Then if we move through the year, their user problem really came into scope. They were burning money, hundreds of millions of dollars on a quarterly basis. The debts were piling up. They finished a year closing in on $1 billion worth of debt. Investors were getting grossly worried. They weren't activating users, they weren't attracting users, they weren't getting the advertising spent. So they had to do something with the platform. And this is where their redesign comes in, because they had to find a way of making the platform more inclusive to other people, simpler to use, but they also had to have functionality that would activate publishers. And that's where the redesign has occurred. Many people don't like change. I remember being very outspoken when Instagram went through their changes. In fact, I remember the whole office saying, we hate the new logo, it's awful, it's not right. Can anyone actually remember the old logo now? And if you look at Instagram's performance, they're thriving. People are back in love with Instagram. We've very much forgotten about the Instagram rebrand. Facebook do this all the time, and we see comments in feed, oh, I don't like it, it's not how it was. Days go by and it's forgotten about. Kylie Jenner is responsible for putting a spotlight on the number of people that wanted to express their frustration with the new Snap look. She definitely is not responsible for their financial failings. We've been saying for many, many months now, Snapchat needed a stronger narrative. Evan Spiegel is a very laid-back guy and he does very few interviews. And in the few interviews he does, he will articulate that he's about getting the proposition right and not speed to market. Conversely, you've got Mark Zuckerberg, who, yes, he is a real advocate of user experience, and he boldly says, get the user experience right and the money will follow. But he's also bullish in front of the camera. He's not afraid to go on stage. He's not afraid to engage media or investors and actually set the aggressive tone for where Facebook are going. And honestly, Snapchat lacked that media leadership last year. And when it's left to people like myself to then form opinions of what's going on with Snapchat, we can express our disdain and frustration en masse, and that becomes the media story. Snapchat needed to give more clarity to where the brand was going, how they were fixing their advertising problem, and how they were going to be attracting more users, and they didn't do any of that. They've put quite a bit into the recent press release, to be fair to them, around the rebrand, and they make the point themselves, this is about appeasing publishers and users. So maybe the penny's dropped. Maybe over the next quarter, we'll see that some of the profits that they clawed back in the last quarter of 2017, that might be a line graph for growth. However, we cannot overlook the fact that Q4 2017 is the biggest ad spend period of the year running up to Christmas. Money would have been flowing around. The real benchmark is going to be on their earnings call at the end of the next quarter. Has the rebrand turned it round? Snapchat believe in it because 1.2 million people said change it, and Evan himself has come out and said we're not doing that. So they believe it's going to deliver something. Is it going to deliver the financial performance required to claw back their debt? I'm really not so sure. I think they have missed that boat. If you've got any questions around Snapchat's performance, or indeed any of the other social channels, or any of the campaigns that you see us run here at Immediate Future, drop us a note through any of our social channels, put the questions to the team, and we will come back to you. Thanks for your time.